She had always been careful about the people she trusted. Her life had taught her lessons that some never learned, that people could smile at you while secretly wishing you would stumble. So, when she received the invitation, her first instinct was to hesitate. The envelope was plain, the handwriting familiar yet distant, and the words on the card seemed almost too polite. It was an invitation to a party, a grand gathering hosted by people who had once been unkind to her. They had laughed at her ambitions, dismissed her opinions, and even tried to make her feel invisible in social gatherings. But there was something in their tone that suggested they wanted to show they had changed. Or maybe that was just what she wanted to believe. For days, she thought about the invitation. She considered not going, telling herself that avoiding it would be safest. But a small part of her wondered if this was an opportunity to show that she was not the same person who had been pushed around before. Her confidence had grown over the years, and she had learned to stand tall, even when the world seemed against her. She wanted to face this challenge, but not out of spite. She wanted to see for herself if people could genuinely change. The day of the party arrived, and she dressed simply, choosing comfort over extravagance. She did not want to play into anyone's expectations. As she approached the house, she noticed the careful decorations, the lights strung around the entrance, and the soft music that floated through the air. Guests were arriving, laughing and chatting, dressed in their finest. She felt a familiar knot in her stomach, the kind that comes when you step into a room where the past lingers at first. The greetings were warm enough to ease her nerves. People she barely knew smiled politely, and a few offered genuine compliments. But beneath the smiles, she could sense something. The subtle glances, the brief whispers that stopped when she looked, the faint tension in the air all suggested that she was not there purely as a friend or guest. She realized quietly she might be walking into a trap. Her suspicions were confirmed when she was asked to participate in a game, designed for everyone to share funny stories about themselves. The tone was lighthearted, but she could feel the setup. The hosts had a way of framing questions so that the answer would reveal some past mistake, some awkward moment she had experienced. As her turn approached, she felt the eyes of the room on her, the anticipation thick. She took a deep breath and reminded herself to stay calm. When she began to speak, she kept her voice steady and even. She shared a story, but instead of being embarrassed, she framed it with humor and grace. The room's mood shifted slightly, and she could see the faint flicker of surprise on some faces. This was not the reaction they had planned. Her poise under pressure threw the setup off balance. People began to realize that she was not the same person they had once underestimated. Throughout the evening, more subtle attempts were made to put her in uncomfortable situations. Someone would bring up a memory, or a question would be asked in a way that seemed innocent but was meant to embarrass. Each time, she responded with a calm and clever answer, turning the situation into one that highlighted her confidence rather than her past mistakes. The laughter that was meant to mock her slowly lost its edge, replaced by curiosity and respect. She also noticed small acts of kindness from unexpected people. A guest, who had always been quiet, offered her a genuine compliment, and another invited her to join a conversation where her opinions were listened to attentively. These moments reminded her that while some people had tried to hurt her, others were simply unaware of the dynamics and were open to seeing her as she truly was. As the party continued, the hosts tried more elaborate schemes, hoping that something would finally shake her composure. They arranged for a toast, subtly mentioning achievements she had struggled to attain in the past, hoping to make her feel inadequate. But she remained composed. When it was her turn to respond, she spoke with warmth, acknowledging her journey and the lessons she had learned. Her words were honest, without arrogance, and they resonated with the guests. Even those who had not intended to be kind found themselves listening. Reflecting on the impact of their actions, the turning point came when a planned prank, involving a minor embarrassment, was deflected effortlessly by her quick thinking. She turned the situation into a light moment, making everyone laugh not at her, but with her. The host's expressions shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion and frustration. The carefully planned humiliation was failing. It was clear to anyone watching that she was in control of her own story. By the end of the evening, the energy in the room had changed completely. The guests who had initially been complicit in the plan were now more cautious, unsure of how to act. Some quietly admired her resilience, while others reconsidered their actions and the ethics behind them. She had not only defended her dignity, but had also subtly shifted the social dynamics of the gathering. The people who had intended to humiliate her were no longer in control. As she left the party, she felt a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. She had faced an environment designed to challenge her, and she had done so with grace and intelligence. The evening was a reminder that true strength comes from composure, self-awareness, and the ability to stay true to oneself even in difficult circumstances. What had been meant to embarrass her ended up being a demonstration of her resilience and poise. Walking away from the house, she thought about the lessons of the night. People may try to manipulate situations, but authenticity and confidence can turn those attempts into opportunities for growth. She realized that the power to control one's reputation lies not in the hands of others, but within oneself. The memory of the party, the initial fear, the eventual triumph would stay with her, a testament to the strength she had cultivated through years of experience. It was a story she could carry forward, a reminder that even when faced with hidden intentions, dignity and self-respect could shine through and transform the outcome in ways no one had expected. The night seemed to stretch endlessly as the party moved into a more private area of the house. What had started as casual laughter and polite conversation gradually changed into a subtle game of observation and manipulation. She could feel the shift immediately. The room grew smaller somehow, the music quieter, and the smiles sharper. Her instincts, which had rarely failed her, told her that this was another layer of the plan. They had set the stage for her to feel exposed and uneasy. But she had learned over time that anticipation could be managed if one stayed calm and alert. Guests mingled around her, some acting overly friendly, as if the past could be rewritten with a few polite words. Others were quietly whispering, watching her with barely concealed expectations. They seemed to be waiting for a mistake, a moment when she would falter and reveal a vulnerability they could mock. She had been in similar situations before, but this felt more orchestrated, more deliberate. Still, she reminded herself that the power lay in how she chose to respond. A game was suggested, one that involved each person sharing something personal in front of the group. The hosts leaned toward her with encouraging smiles, subtly implying that she should start. She realized immediately that this was meant to make her feel nervous, to put her on display. Her heart beat faster, but she held her composure. She had learned that preparation and calmness could turn situations like this to her advantage. When her turn came, she chose to speak about a challenge she had faced in her early years. A moment when she had struggled, but ultimately learned a lesson. She told it with honesty and a touch of humor, turning what could have been a moment of shame into an inspiring story. The room, expecting embarrassment, fell silent. Faces showed surprise, some even admiration. She saw the subtle confusion in the host's expressions. This was not the reaction they had anticipated. After she spoke, the hosts tried a different tactic. They began a series of questions, each designed to probe insecurities or highlight past failures. But she had anticipated this, and her answers were measured, confident, and occasionally humorous. She could feel the balance of power slowly shifting. The more she spoke, the more it became clear that the audience was seeing her as she truly was, intelligent, composed, and unafraid to face difficult situations. During these moments, she also noticed the reactions of the other guests. Some of them, who had initially seemed complicit, were now clearly reconsidering their own positions. Their laughter faltered, their whispers quieted, and a few even offered small gestures of support. One guest, who had been standing near the edge of the room, nodded encouragingly at her. Another made a comment that turned the conversation toward her achievements rather than her past mistakes. Slowly, she realized that the environment was beginning to change in her favor. The hosts, sensing that their plan was unraveling, attempted more elaborate schemes. They arranged for a situation where she would be asked to perform a small task that was clearly beyond her comfort zone, expecting hesitation or awkwardness. but she approached it with grace. She completed the task quickly and cleverly, turning what was meant to embarrass her into an example of her resourcefulness. The room, which had been waiting for her to fail, now watched her with interest and quiet admiration. Even the hosts could no longer mask their disappointment. Throughout the evening, she observed carefully, noting who genuinely appreciated her presence and who still harbored intentions to belittle her. This awareness allowed her to navigate the gathering strategically, responding to challenges with a balance of honesty and diplomacy. She avoided unnecessary confrontation but also did not allow anyone to diminish her confidence. Her calm and attentive demeanor made it clear that attempts to manipulate her would not succeed. At one point, a particularly pointed remark was made about a professional or personal setback she had experienced. The comment was meant to provoke embarrassment, but she responded with insight and a positive reflection on what she had learned. Her response shifted the attention from judgment to admiration. The air in the room changed again, and she could see some guests quietly reassessing their opinions. The hosts, realizing their tactics were failing, exchanged uneasy glances. As the night wore on, she also found moments of genuine connection. Guests who had not been involved in the original plan approached her, sharing their own experiences and acknowledging her resilience. These conversations were quiet, sincere, and affirming. She realized that while some people had tried to undermine her, many others were open to seeing the person she truly was. These interactions gave her strength and reinforced her belief that confidence and authenticity could transform even the most challenging situations. The hosts, frustrated by their inability to provoke a reaction, attempted one final move, a subtle comparison to another guest, meant to highlight perceived shortcomings. But she anticipated this as well. With tact and kindness, she redirected the attention to shared accomplishments and mutual respect, turning potential embarrassment into a moment of inclusion. The strategy worked perfectly, and the tension in the room dissipated. The guests who had been complicit in the setup were left to watch her handle every situation with intelligence and poise. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The initial plan to humiliate her had not only failed, but it also inadvertently highlighted her strengths and resilience. She had taken control of the narrative, demonstrating that dignity, awareness, and calm confidence could neutralize attempts at manipulation. The room, once filled with subtle mockery, now resonated with respect and admiration. Leaving the party, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The evening had tested her patience, her courage, and her ability to remain composed under pressure. Yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and fully aware of her own power to shape how she was perceived. She realized that the true measure of strength was not in avoiding challenges, but in facing them with grace and integrity. The party, intended as a trap, had instead become a stage for her to reclaim her dignity and show the world the depth of her character. The room had changed since she first arrived. The atmosphere, once filled with subtle tension and quiet anticipation, now hummed with curiosity and surprise. She could feel it in the air, the shift of power from those who had intended to humiliate her to herself. It had been a long evening filled with careful observation and measured responses. And now the moment of transformation was beginning to take hold. She was no longer merely navigating the trap set before her. She was subtly guiding the narrative, turning each challenge into an opportunity to showcase her poise and resilience. A group had gathered near the corner of the room, and she noticed their glances toward her. The hosts were speaking in hushed tones, their expressions betraying their frustration. The intricate plans they had so carefully orchestrated seemed to be dissolving before their eyes. They tried to maintain the facade of control, but the cracks were evident. Even the guests who had initially sided with them now looked on with a mixture of surprise and respect. She understood in that moment that confidence could change perceptions faster than any explanation could. One of the hosts approached, smiling in a way that suggested encouragement, yet carried a subtle undertone of expectation. They presented a challenge, a small but public task, one designed to embarrass her or expose her inexperience. They believed the spotlight would force her into discomfort. she would falter and give them the satisfaction of seeing her uneasy. She listened carefully, measuring her words and actions before responding. Her response was not only composed but clever, and it immediately neutralized the intended effect. The task meant as a trap now highlighted her intelligence and adaptability. Gasps of quiet admiration began to ripple through the room, encouraged by her composure. Some guests began to engage with her more genuinely. They asked questions, not to tease or provoke, but out of real interest. They shared their own stories, vulnerabilities that mirrored her experiences. In those moments, she found the unexpected power of connection. The room, which had initially been orchestrated for embarrassment, now felt more like a space for mutual recognition and respect. Each conversation she had subtly shifted the atmosphere further, the initial intent of the hosts being overshadowed by the authenticity of her presence. The hosts, realizing that their previous attempts had failed, devised a more complex scenario. They wanted to place her in a position where she would need to make a difficult decision, one that could have social consequences. It was a clever ploy meant to pressure her into reacting emotionally or making a mistake. Yet she approached it with calmness and reflection. She considered the situation from multiple angles, anticipating potential outcomes. It made a choice that was both fair and thoughtful. The room reacted not with laughter or derision, but with approval and quiet acknowledgement. Her decisiveness had turned the tables once again amid the unfolding events. She noticed small but meaningful gestures from the guests. Someone discreetly offered a word of encouragement. Another shared a personal insight that aligned with her story, and a few nodded knowingly, as if recognizing the strength it took to remain composed. These moments were subtle yet powerful, affirming that her presence and responses were making a real impact. She realized that resilience was contagious. By maintaining her dignity, she was inspiring others to reflect on their own actions and attitudes. As the night progressed, the hosts attempted yet another tactic, a comparison meant to highlight perceived shortcomings. It was a subtle maneuver, designed to sow doubt and insecurity. She listened carefully, allowing the comment to pass without immediate reaction. Then, with a calm and insightful response, she reframed the situation. She acknowledged the achievements of others while emphasizing the value of her own experiences. Her response was inclusive, measured, and dignified. The intended embarrassment did not land. Instead, the room filled with quiet admiration for her intelligence and grace. The turning point came when a minor prank, arranged to catch her off guard, backfired spectacularly. The hosts had placed a harmless but embarrassing object in her path, expecting her to stumble or react with discomfort. Instead, she used it creatively, incorporating it into a lighthearted moment that drew laughter from the room. The laughter was not at her, but with her, transforming the energy entirely. The host's frustration was palpable, and it was clear to everyone that their carefully laid plans had failed. She had not only defended her dignity, but had reshaped the dynamics of the gathering entirely. Throughout the evening, she remained aware of her surroundings, carefully observing reactions, and engaging with those who responded genuinely. She understood that perception was powerful, and by maintaining authenticity and composure, she could influence how others viewed the situation. Each interaction, each thoughtful response, reinforced her position. What had been intended as a display of her vulnerability became a testament to her strength, intelligence, and social awareness. By the time the party reached its later hours, the host's authority had significantly diminished. Guests who had initially followed their lead were now questioning the motives behind the planned humiliations. Some of them quietly expressed respect for her, while others reflected on their own participation in the setup. She could sense a growing realization in the room that the initial power dynamics had shifted irreversibly. She had turned a potential moment of weakness into a demonstration of self-control, strategic thinking, and emotional intelligence. As the night wound down, she took a moment to reflect on the experience. The series of challenges and subtle manipulations she had faced could have been overwhelming. Yet she had met each one with grace, insight, and humor. She had transformed what was intended to diminish her into opportunities for growth and connection. The party, designed as a stage for humiliation, become a platform for demonstrating resilience and inspiring others. Walking away from the gathering, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The evening had tested her in ways she had anticipated and in ways she had not. It had been a lesson in observation, strategy, and the quiet power of self-assurance. More importantly, it had shown her that true influence comes not from forcing others to acknowledge you, but from demonstrating integrity, intelligence, and courage. The night's events would remain with her as a testament to the strength she had cultivated over time. A story of transformation and the unexpected ways in which dignity can prevail against intentioned adversity. The energy in the room had shifted so much that it was almost tangible. The subtle tension that had been present when she first arrived had completely transformed. Guests who had been quiet or hesitant were now speaking freely, sharing their thoughts and opinions. And some were even apologizing quietly for having doubted her or participated in the subtle schemes. She noticed the hosts watching her with increasingly uneasy expressions, their confidence diminishing with each passing moment. The careful plans they had laid out to humiliate her were unraveling in ways they could not control. A small group of guests, who had been watching closely from the beginning, began to piece together the truth. Whispers traveled from one person to another, pointing out how orchestrated some moments had been, how the hosts had tried to manipulate reactions. As these observations grew louder, more guests began to realize that the humiliation attempts were not spontaneous or innocent. Slowly, the hosts' influence in the room diminished. Their authority, once assumed, had been quietly eroded by her composure and intelligence. At one point, a guest who had previously been hesitant stood up to speak. With calm conviction, they described the subtle ways the party had been set up. Acknowledging that the intent was to embarrass her, their words were measured but firm, and others began nodding, validating the observation. The hosts tried to interrupt, but the room was no longer listening to them the way it had been. The revelation spread like a ripple, and suddenly the narrative shifted from her vulnerability to the calculated intentions of the hosts. She remained composed throughout, observing rather than reacting emotionally. She had anticipated that once the guests began to understand the motives, the social dynamic would change, and she wanted to ensure it shifted in a way that preserved dignity for everyone. Instead of confrontation, she allowed the situation to unfold naturally. Her calm presence, combined with the subtle way she had handled each challenge, allowed the truth to emerge organically without her needing to dominate the conversation. As the realization spread, some guests began to speak to her privately, offering words of respect and admiration. They acknowledged her grace under pressure and the clever ways she had navigated the situations designed to unsettle her. Others shared their own stories of past embarrassment, creating a space for empathy and understanding rather than ridicule. It was a remarkable transformation. The gathering that had been designed to humiliate her was now filled with support, validation, and mutual respect. The hosts, sensing that their attempts were not only failing but being exposed, tried one last effort to regain control. They attempted to redirect attention, creating a distraction and calling for a group activity that would place her back in a potentially embarrassing position. Yet she handled it with ease, turning the moment into an inclusive and lighthearted experience for everyone. Her ability to respond calmly and cleverly diffused the tension entirely, leaving the hosts without any remaining leverage. Gradually, the guests who had been complicit in the original plan began to reflect on their behavior. Some quietly apologized, acknowledging that they had allowed themselves to be influenced by the host's intentions. Others expressed relief that she had responded with dignity and resilience, demonstrating that strength was not measured by dominance, but by composure and self-respect. The room, which had once been carefully orchestrated to humiliate her, now resonated with admiration and thoughtful reflection. Throughout this transformation, she remained humble. She did not gloat or assert superiority. Instead, she continued to interact sincerely with those around her, showing that confidence did not require arrogance. She engaged with both supporters and skeptics, listening attentively and responding thoughtfully. Her behavior further reinforced the shift in perception. She had turned an environment designed to undermine her into one that highlighted her intelligence, grace, and emotional strength. As the evening moved toward its conclusion, the host's authority had effectively vanished. Guests no longer looked to them for cues or guidance. Instead, many were engaging with her, seeking her perspective and valuing her presence. The subtle power dynamics that had been at play from the beginning were now completely reversed. What had been an evening of potential humiliation had become a demonstration of resilience, strategic thinking, and integrity. The final moments of the party were quiet yet significant. Guests exchanged respectful goodbyes, some lingering to offer personal words of admiration. She left the room not only unscathed, but elevated in the eyes of those who had once doubted her. The hosts, who had intended to orchestrate a public humiliation, were left to reflect on the failure of their plans and the unintended outcome of showcasing her strength. The shift in perception was complete. The narrative had changed, and she had emerged as the respected figure in the gathering. Walking away from the house, she felt a sense of calm triumph. The events of the night had tested her patience, her intelligence, and her emotional control, but she had met each challenge with grace and insight. She had turned a potential moment of shame into an opportunity to demonstrate dignity and inspire reflection among the guests. The experience was a reminder that integrity, composure, and strategic awareness could not only neutralize attempts at humiliation, but also transform the environment into one of respect and admiration. As she reflected on the evening, she realized that the true lesson was not only about facing challenges, but also about the power of perception. By remaining authentic and composed, she had influenced how others saw her and reshaped their understanding of the situation. The party, initially intended to undermine her, had become a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the subtle but profound influence of character. She had reclaimed her dignity, reshaped social dynamics, and left a lasting impression that would endure far beyond the night itself. The night was drawing to a close, yet its impact lingered like a quiet hum in the air. She felt a deep sense of calm and accomplishment as she prepared to leave, knowing that the events of the evening had unfolded in a way no one, not even the hosts, could have predicted. What had been intended as a public humiliation had turned into a demonstration of her strength, composure, and resilience. She walked through the room one last time, acknowledging those who had offered kind words or gestures, and she received nods of respect in return. Each interaction reminded her of the power of authenticity and dignity. The hosts, who had meticulously planned every detail of the evening to place her in uncomfortable situations, were now subdued. Their faces revealed a mixture of frustration, embarrassment, and grudging respect. The guests, who had once been complicit or passive, were now aware of the effort and thoughtfulness she had put into handling each challenge. Some whispered among themselves, reflecting on their own behavior and the lessons they could take away. In that moment, she realized that her presence had not only changed perceptions about her, but it also influenced how others viewed themselves. As she prepared to leave, a few guests approached her to speak privately. They expressed admiration for the way she had handled the evening, noting how effortlessly she had maintained her composure in situations designed to provoke discomfort. They shared stories of their own experiences with subtle social manipulation, acknowledging that her responses had inspired them to reconsider their own actions. Each conversation reinforced a powerful truth. True strength was demonstrated through integrity, calmness, and thoughtful responses rather than through aggression or dominance. Walking through the quiet streets after leaving the party, she reflected on the lessons of the evening. She had been tested in ways that mirrored real life, unexpected challenges, subtle manipulations, and the pressure to conform to expectations. Yet she had met each challenge with intelligence, tact, and courage. She realized that her ability to remain true to herself, to think strategically, and to respond with empathy had transformed a potentially humiliating situation into a defining moment of personal strength. The experience also underscored the importance of awareness and observation. From the beginning, she had paid attention to subtle cues, the way people looked at her, the whispers that stopped when she turned, and the calculated suggestions presented by the hosts. By understanding the dynamics at play, she was able to navigate the evening strategically, responding to challenges in a way that preserved her dignity and highlighted her capabilities. This awareness had been a key factor in her ability to turn the situation around. She thought about the host's intentions and how carefully they had orchestrated the event. It was clear they had underestimated her, assuming that past experiences of discomfort would shape her reactions. Yet she had anticipated the possibility of manipulation and had prepared herself mentally to remain composed. Her resilience was not a matter of luck. It was the result of years of self-awareness, learning from past experiences, and cultivating the ability to face challenges with calm confidence. The evening had validated the strength she had developed over time as she walked. She also considered the reactions of the guests. Many had quietly reassessed their judgments, realizing that their assumptions had been flawed. The evening had provided a subtle but powerful lesson. Attempts to control or manipulate others often backfire when faced with composure, intelligence, and authenticity. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the evening had not only demonstrated her resilience, but it also prompted reflection among those who had witnessed. She remembered specific moments that had been pivotal, the subtle jokes and orchestrated tasks, the comparisons meant to provoke insecurity, and the minor pranks designed to unsettle her had all been neutralized by her thoughtful and strategic responses. Each instance had reinforced her understanding of human behavior and the importance of remaining centered under pressure. She had transformed potential moments of embarrassment into opportunities for connection, learning, and inspiration. The evening also reinforced the power of humility and grace. At no point had she needed to assert dominance or criticize the hosts openly. Instead, she had allowed her actions and responses to speak for themselves. By demonstrating patience, composure, and intelligence, she had shifted the social dynamic without creating unnecessary conflict. The subtlety of her approach ensured that her dignity remained intact while the host's plans unraveled. As she reached her home, she felt a sense of closure. The night had been a test, a challenge, and a lesson all in one. It had shown her the value of preparation, awareness, and authenticity in navigating complex social situations. She realized that humiliation, when met with composure and insight, could be transformed into an opportunity for personal growth and the demonstration of inner strength. The evening had reinforced the truth that character, intelligence, and resilience were far more powerful than manipulation, mockery, or superficial social games. In the days that followed, she reflected on the experience often. The lessons she had learned were not just about handling one evening of social pressure, but about navigating life with confidence and grace. She understood that challenges would continue to arise, that people might attempt to manipulate or undermine her, and that social dynamics could be unpredictable. Yet she now had the assurance that by remaining true to herself, thinking strategically, and responding with calm intelligence, she could navigate any situation successfully. The story of the party, once intended to humiliate her, became a testament to her resilience and character. Those who had witnessed the events could not ignore the impact of her composure and intelligence. She had not only preserved her dignity, but had also influenced the perceptions of everyone present, turning a potentially negative experience into a defining moment of respect and admiration. The host's plans had failed spectacularly, and in doing so, had inadvertently highlighted her strengths and capacity for leadership. Ultimately, the evening served as a reminder that true strength is not about seeking validation or control over others, but about maintaining integrity, self-awareness, and grace under pressure. She had faced a carefully orchestrated attempt to diminish her, and she had emerged not only unscathed, but elevated. Her actions had demonstrated that dignity, intelligence, and authenticity could overcome manipulation and social pressure, leaving a lasting impression that would endure far beyond a single night. The memory of the party became a quiet source of inspiration for her, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, one can remain centered, composed, and true to oneself. She understood that respect earned through character and resilience was far more valuable than any superficial approval. And with this understanding, she moved forward into her life with renewed confidence, knowing that no attempt to undermine her could succeed if she maintained her authenticity, awareness, and inner strength. Even though the party was over, the impact of that evening lingered in ways she had not expected. In the days following, people who had attended began to talk about what had happened, and the story spread quietly among her social circles. Her name, once associated with doubt and underestimation by some, became linked to resilience, intelligence, and calm strength. She found herself receiving messages of admiration from both people she knew and those who had been present but had remained in the background. Each note reminded her that the way she carried herself had a ripple effect far beyond the room where the party took place. She reflected on the events with clarity, considering each interaction and challenge. The subtle ways the hosts had tried to manipulate her, orchestrated pranks, the pointed comments designed to provoke insecurity, all had been met with calm observation, strategic response, and composure. She realized that her success had not come from luck, but from the ability to remain self-aware, understand social dynamics, and respond thoughtfully. Each challenge had been a test of not only her patience, but also her insight into human behavior. One morning, she received a visit from a guest who had been particularly observant during the party. They spoke at length about the evening, highlighting the moments when her poise had turned situations around. The guest admitted they had been skeptical at first, expecting the orchestrated humiliation to succeed, but were surprised and inspired by the way she navigated every challenge. This conversation reinforced the idea that true influence comes not from force or aggression, but from integrity, calm intelligence, and authenticity. She also considered the hosts and their reaction. It was clear they had underestimated her ability to manage difficult social situations. Their failure, though not malicious in a personal sense, had been a lesson in misjudging character. She realized that attempts to control or manipulate others often reveal more about the intentions of those who try than the abilities of those targeted. The host's frustration had been visible not only during the party, but also in subtle ways afterward. As the story of her resilience quietly became the narrative remembered by the guests in the days that followed, she noticed changes in the behavior of those who had been at the party. Some who had been passive participants or complicit in the subtle attempts to embarrass her began to act with greater respect and thoughtfulness. The evening had subtly influenced their understanding of social dynamics, empathy, and the importance of integrity. She realized that by remaining composed and authentic, she had not only defended herself, but had also provided an unspoken lesson to others about how to navigate social challenges with grace. At work, friends and colleagues began sharing snippets of the story, and she observed how it affected perceptions. People who had doubted her abilities began to treat her with more respect, recognizing not only her professional skills, but also her social intelligence and emotional strength. The evening had become more than a single event. It had evolved into a demonstration of character that others could see and learn from. She found satisfaction in knowing that the night's events had quietly transformed her reputation in meaningful ways. She spent time reflecting on her own personal growth as well. The experience reinforced her understanding that composure under pressure is cultivated over time and through deliberate effort. She thought about the years of learning to navigate difficult social situations, self-awareness she had developed, and the patience required to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. The party, in a sense, had acted as a final test, confirming that the skills she had honed over time were not only effective but also powerful in influencing perceptions and outcomes. She also noticed that her own confidence had grown in subtle ways. The ability to handle a carefully orchestrated attempt at humiliation without losing composure was empowering. It reminded her that the opinions or schemes of others do not define her worth, and that dignity, intelligence, and authenticity have a lasting influence that far outweighs temporary social judgments. She felt a renewed sense of trust in her own abilities, both in social situations and in broader aspects of her life. Over the next weeks, she found herself in situations that echoed aspects of the party, moments where she was observed, subtly tested, or faced with social challenges. In each instance, she drew on the lessons of that night. She remained calm, thoughtful, and observant, using the experience to navigate situations strategically rather than reactively. The memory of the party became a reference point, a reminder that dignity and intelligence can transform adversity into opportunity. She also began to share aspects of her experience with close friends and trusted colleagues, not as a story of victory over others, but as a lesson in self-awareness, resilience, and strategy. She emphasized that the goal was not to seek revenge or prove superiority, but to navigate challenges while maintaining authenticity and composure. Her reflections were thoughtful, emphasizing empathy, awareness of social dynamics, and the power of calm, strategic responses to difficult situations. The impact of the party extended further when she noticed that the host's influence had diminished within the broader social group. People were less inclined to follow the same patterns of judgment or manipulation, having witnessed firsthand how orchestrated attempts at embarrassment could fail when met with composure and intelligence. The evening had quietly shifted the social dynamics in subtle but meaningful ways, and she found satisfaction in knowing that the lessons learned extended beyond her own personal experience.